Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the County Manager and Superintendent Budget Forecast Overview, Joint Budget Forum between the county and schools. I think this is like the 6th year that we've done it. And my, greetings to all the members of the audience. And we'll have an opportunity, I think, as we go around to introduce some people here from senior staff on both sides. We also have school board member-elect Reed Goldstein right over there, who's shaking hands. So tonight what we're going to do is that I'll have hopefully a brief presentation, and then Dr. Murphy will go ahead, and then we're going to go into small breakout groups. We have staff here who are going to help facilitate that, and there'll be some questions that they're going to ask you. And so let me just flip to the next slide here that lays out what's scheduled. You can see that in the small group breakout, we have some questions for you that we're going to ask. We're going to ask you to take a look at what priorities you might recommend to us, then general areas of efficiencies and reductions, and then something that falls into the other category, which are basically other areas that you think that might be useful for us to focus on. So some of you may have heard this presentation previously. This is a summary of some material that we've already given to the county board back in October when we gave a preview, and also November when the board adopted its budget guidance. But you can see that Arlington is continuing to grow, population is up, and service demands continue to grow. And we continue to have a healthy growth in school population, which I'm sure Dr. Murphy will talk about. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening with our real estate market right now. Now, the county is made up of, essentially, our real estate revenue comes in almost equal parts from our commercial and residential tax base. And so for residential, our anticipation right now is that there'll be slightly positive revenue trends for a residential assessment. And that is somewhere in the 2 to 3% range. And then for apartments, we're going to have slower growth in rents, which essentially means the values for those are going to be holding steady. And then for commercial office, we have a fairly high vacancy rate, and that has an impact on the kind of revenue assumptions we make from real estate for commercial office space. So that is something we'll talk about a little bit here in the next slide. We can see the countywide commercial vacancy rate. If you see what happened starting basically around 2011, you have seen the county's commercial vacancy rate go from a low of back then of 8.1% up to a high of 23.6%, which was last quarter of 2014. Since then, the rate has come down a little bit, and it's still far too high. And the situation that's created by this is that with higher vacancy rates, we have that split between commercial and residential, which normally is 50-50, will skew a little bit, where the burden will fall a little bit more on the residential property taxpayer. So the kinds of increases we're anticipating for residential assessments are approximately around 3%, and the commercial property growth is going to be flat to negative. And so, as I mentioned, that burden sort of switches over to the residential side a little bit more. Some of the other taxes, which you all have the pleasure of paying, are your meals tax and your sales tax. Those are all increasing and looking pretty healthy. Some other taxes that we collect, which are those for the privilege of putting a little decal on your car and paying for your personal property. Those revenues are projected to be flat, as are revenues from our state government and our federal government. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what this might mean for the average residential homeowner. As you can see from this bar chart, if you are a homeowner who is facing a 3% increase in assessment, that will essentially mean another $175 out of your pocket towards taxes. And then if you include fees, which not everybody pays all the fees, but if you have some of the fees, for example, one fee that all homeowners will pay would be the new $35 add-on fee for year-round yard waste collection. You can see that the burden could go up as much as $242. Now again, this is average, so if you're sitting at home in January and you get your real estate assessment notice and it says your value went up higher. Just remember I said it was an average, and it could also be lower. And you can see the changes over the last 4 years. So, what we do in the county side, we build a budget. We build a continuing services budget when we're trying to figure out how to approach a budget year. And that means essentially we're going to plan on delivering in 2017, fiscal year 2017, which starts July 1st of 2016, a budget that assumes the same programs we have now. And with that, some of those same programs come natural cost increases that are built into. For example, Metro, we have some additional costs associated with our contribution to Metro. Debt service is going up a little bit. We have some county facility costs that are going up. They're almost 10%. That is a result of the county consolidating some of its human services facilities down at the Sequoia Complex and Washington Boulevard and Route 50. Some contractual increases for contracts that's just written in. Basically, there's the cost, not cost of living. You have the CPI adjustment every year in those contracts, and healthcare and other post-employment benefits. For those of you out there who don't know what that means, which I'm hoping that's probably a lot of you won't know what that means, that is healthcare costs for our retirees. And then when we're building our budget, we also assume that employees will get a pay raise. And I'll talk a little bit about what are the components of that pay raise in a few minutes. Again, when we say non-discretionary, what we're meaning is that if we continue, and you can see that on the slides, some of the actual names of the boxes there were eliminated. But they would be including all the kinds of changes that I just mentioned. So it would be debt service. Let me go back to the other slide here. Debt service, Metro, all those costs are, believe it or not, they are represented there. Okay. For the county, we have made an estimate based on the revenue that we're getting and how that's shared, that we will have a gap somewhere between $2 and $4 million, so we've said $3 million. We have schools, and Dr. Murphy can speak to it because I think they may have a more refined estimate right now. The estimate is somewhere close to $12 million, driven by the increase in enrollment and their capacity needs, and then trying to do something with compensation. Wanted to talk a little bit about, since this is a county schools budget forum, about what is included in the county budget that actually goes to support schools. So these are a couple of things. The most important one is the share of our local tax revenue. So there is, the County Board and School Board have adopted some revenue sharing principles, and what happens is when the budget was adopted last year, we sat down with our pencils and we figured out what percentage of local revenue went to schools, and that came out to 46.5%. So that's the starting point for this year, and there's certain revenue that comes with that. And then in addition, we provide somewhere close to $8 million in resources to the schools for those kinds of things that you'll see in schools, like school resource officers, those are police officers, school nurses, crossing guards, and then we also do some work related to safe routes to schools. There's the revenue sharing allocation I talked about. And then the result of that allocation is that there will be a transfer estimated somewhere close to $460 million to the schools. So that's an increase of about a little bit over $8 million. So that's all derived by a formula. Now, some of the information I mentioned earlier that are faced both by the county and schools, and I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly, is you'll see population growth, that in 2010 we had population and employment numbers that continue to grow and are estimated to keep growing over the next 30 years. And the student enrollment growth, which Dr. Murphy will talk about, he can get into a little bit more details, but that's averaged somewhere around 3 to 5% per year over the last 5 years. We have, with all those increases in population, we have increases in housing and human service needs. And I know there's a lot of information on this slide. It's available on our website. I don't want to spend a lot of time focusing on it, but essentially this is talking about the level of assistance we provide to those who are the least able among our population and the most in need of support totally and permanent disabled people who live in housing, and clients and patients of county services, including our mental health services. We do a range of things here on the county side that we have many lines of business, several hundred, but the one that's one of the most important ones is the work we do with public safety, and you can see that there are increases in prisoner population. There's been a lot of changing demands for police and fire. That's actually going to be a subject of a conversation tomorrow afternoon with the county board. We have increased demands on our parks and our libraries and transportation and roads. So with all that, we went to, as we do every year, went to the board, and the board prepared for us, for staff, and looking at the budget, some guidance about how to put together the fiscal year 2017 budget. And there are a lot of words on this slide, but essentially what the board said is come back with a proposed budget that is not proposing an increase in the tax rate and based on the estimates we have right now of revenue, but if for some reason our revenues go higher than that, there are some choices we've been given. We could offer reduction in tax rates or meeting priority needs or a combination of that. But this is where the board spend most of their time, which is in order for us to present a budget right now which has a gap, we need to spend our time exploring what kinds of program and personnel reductions or eliminations to make. And so there are a lot of things that we traditionally look at this time of year, and I'm hoping that tonight in the budget forums that we have in the little groups, that somebody here will have a brilliant idea that we haven't thought of, that's happened in the past. We'll even take less than brilliant ideas. So we're working on that. We're working on looking at refining some of our fees, and doing, the board directed us to do an analysis of our senior tax relief programs and added another public engagement session during the tax and budget hearings that normally take place in March. So, as I said, our strategies include ideas pursued in the past years. I'm starting to meet tomorrow with department heads to talk through their proposals. And I'm urging them to not ask for increases. We'll see how that goes when they come in. Any increase they ask for, they have to come in with an offsetting reduction. And we're looking for efficiencies, and we're looking for input from the board and from the public. And here are some of the challenges and opportunities that I think I've highlighted as we go through, which is we have an increasing population, we have increasing school enrollment, we have continuing challenges with our office vacancy rate, and then we have a number of areas where the board has stated priorities in affordable housing. We have a new digital strategy, which we'll talk a little bit about as we go on the next couple of weeks and months. So, next steps, we're going to be preparing our proposed budget that comes to the board in February, fully informed by what's going to happen in the real estate market. Final numbers happen in the beginning of January. And we have some the proposed budget in February 20th. We have public budget hearings and tax rate hearings, and then adoption of the budget in April. So that concludes my remarks. A lot of dry material there. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Murphy, who I've been promised will be much more exciting.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz, and good evening, and thank you all for coming out. My presentation is going to parallel very closely to what Mark shared. I want to start out, though, by kind of forecasting a little bit ahead and having you think out what the school division in the county is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years. And you'll see here from these slides that we are going to eclipse 30,000 students. And so right now, while we're at just over 25,000 students, we need to begin to prepare and to think about that. So use that as a little bit of a backdrop and a bit of a precursor to some of the things I'll share with you then as we go through the presentation. Recently, we released an infographic on our achievement. We've done this for the last several years. Some of the things here that are just highlighted, and I think the bottom line is we are a high-performing school division. We have high expectations for our students. We have a very rigorous strategic plan, and we continue to show some of the achievements here with our graduation rate, also the number of students that are moving on to either a 2-year or 4-year college, a reduction in the dropout rate. And also we're seeing this happen at a very early time in a student's career with those students already in middle school pursuing high school credits that really set them up then for post-secondary opportunities. As of last week, the niche rankings came out, as we've found in the past with these rankings and the indicators they use. And it's important to remember you can use any set of indicators to have yourself look good or bad. But according to the indicators they use here, Arlington is recognized 44 across the nation, and state ranked, we're number 1. You can see that our elementary schools in the state of Virginia, I think they take the first 16 spots, as well as our middle and high schools also are represented very strongly here in this particular poll. Mark alluded to it, but we saw an increase in enrollment of 709 students this year. That was not the original forecast, but over the last several years, you can see that we've had a fluctuation plus or minus 800. I compare that to the equivalency of about 1 elementary school, but that's across the pre-K through 12 level. You can see the increase over the past 6 years, and then we see somewhat of a similar projection as we move forward. And I'll illustrate that a little bit as far as the students that are already in the pipeline. I talked about the 30,000 school division. And just like in Mr. Schwartz's charts, I mirrored his image with values. And so you can see in the fall of 2021 that we are going to be, right now, based on projections, striking that 30,000 mark. One of the pieces that you always hear about is, well, how do you know that's going to happen? What evidence is there? And this chart, I think, really captures that. On the far left-hand side there, with the grade bars, those are graduating classes that have left us. And you can see they're sitting right at 1,400 plus. You can see the 12th grade class and all the classes represented in blue. Those are current enrollments. But I think and there's a host of ways that you can analyze this. Here's really the bottom line. Starting from 3rd grade, going back to cohorts that have not yet arrived, we're over 2,100 students. We're flaking off cohorts, though, that are at 1,400 students, and they do gradually increase to 1,800. But the bottom line is those students are already here, they're in the pipeline, and they're continuing to move forward. Based on what we're forecasting, we're continuing to see class cohorts of about 21, 22. So the reality is those students are coming, and we need to continue to be prepared for that. And that's not it, really factoring in any other increases in population, should we say. These students are actually here in the system. So here is a little bit of a refinement. If we look at our current budget, you can see we're at $557.4 million. As Mark noted, we're expecting an increase of a county transfer right now, and I remember the words of Barbara Donnellan. Just realize the budget process is a fluid one, and one guarantee that I have is it'll change from the information I share with you tonight will definitely change to where we end up at the end of the day, and then she told me to relax. Based on the county transfer at this point, also some adjustments we're projecting with revenue. That would be state, federal, as well as local, as well as our use of one-time money. We see a small deficit there. But I think the big picture when we come down to expenditures is we're forecasting right now, because of enrollment growth, $10.9 million, almost $11 million. We've also expected the compensation increase, and this is a range here based on what decisions we make, of anywhere from $8 to $10 million. We have some adjustments with other expenditures. So our number is a little bit broader. It's in the same field of range, though, as Mark shared with you, and we're looking at somewhere between a 12 to 15 million dollar gap at this point in time. We've got a host of different community engagements. One of the things that's been real successful for us is we've gone out and had sounding board meetings with staff where we've gone out to schools and we've gotten some firsthand information that we think's been very helpful, and it's also somewhat impromptu. So those meetings have served us well. We have a key stakeholder meeting coming up here later this week. We've got a host of community budget forums, and we also welcome feedback through a variety of different venues. Some of the things we've been hearing is continue to invest in technology. There's also the converse to that, a little bit of hesitation. Go slow, make sure you know which way you're going, as was identified earlier, about being efficient, looking at perhaps freezing salaries and hiring, and then also reducing costs per pupil. That's very initial. That's some of the things also, by the way, that we've heard in previous years. When we look at just what APS has to offer, we're the second largest employer of over 4,200 employees. Our staff has an approximate, what I'll call investment in our community of 13 years. 82% of our teachers have advanced degrees, and we also have a high percentage of our teachers receiving the National Board certification, both here in Virginia as well as recognized nationally. Some of the next steps, we've got a host of forums. Most significantly, we have a forum for our Spanish community. My proposed budget comes out the end of February, and then there will be a public hearing on March 17th. We've got the school board proposed budget coming the first part of April, and then the board's adoption about a month away in the first week of May. So I think that is where we are. Mark, I guess I'll turn it back over to you to maybe organize those folks that are here for the breakouts.
So thanks, Dr. Murphy. Just one or two other things I wanted to add. As Dr. Murphy said, it's really important for everybody to pay attention to what's going on with the budget process. Those numbers will change, especially in January when we get more refined revenue estimates. And the most important part for everybody to remember is that tonight is just one opportunity for public input. You'll have many more opportunities, starting with when the budget is proposed, both for the county and the schools. And I know your board has a number of work sessions that people will have. Our county board has a number of work sessions where a number of questions are asked and where we have commissions come and testify. So there's many opportunities. So with that, I think that the slide laid out some of the questions that are going to be asked. And I think that, Mary Beth, if you can come up here for a second. We're going to go into some breakout groups, and we have some facilitators for each of those groups.
It looks like we have about 15 members of the public and a number of staff. So to make it a good discussion, it might be helpful to break it into two groups. So if I can ask the public to move, select tables in the back, kind of break yourselves up, and then we're going to have to talk to staff about what we do with all of you guys too. So, so if the public can break into two groups, and if it seems too crowded, then we can break into three. But we have the questions on the tables back there. I don't know.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up for TV right now. We're going to go into our small groups, and I want to thank everybody for listening.